Fuzzy.
Mark here for Mark 2.0. Well, you remember them from The Love Boat. Ted Lange and Fred Grandy, better known as Isaac and Gopher, join us today on the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Yeah, Ted Lange and Fred Grandy, Isaac and Gopher. Which one is which?
Gopher is Fred, Ted is...
know. Yeah. Well, that
on occasion I've been called Fred,
yeah,
and that was by my wife, and I wanted to know what the hell was going on. Yeah,
some things are better left unsaid, but
Well, it was called The Love Boat, and it was the late 70s, early 80s. Things are opening up.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's
you know, when the
true.
show first premiered, it was on Saturday night at 10 o'clock, which is considered to be a graveyard slot. That's
Yes.
where they put shows that they were kind of obligated to buy because perhaps the producer was a powerful guy. And of course, Aaron Spelling was a very powerful guy. And they kind of put The Love Boat on as a favor to Aaron because he had so many other hits on. They said, but we'll put it on at 10 o'clock and it'll get buried by the Burnett show or some other thing. Well, we knocked the Burnett show off the air in about what, 4 weeks, right, Teddy? And
Yeah,
then
Carol
they put-
Burnett was the juggernaut
Yeah,
until the boat sailed into her time slot.
yeah. I mean, she was the juggernaut, but like we were the Bismarck. Okay, we knocked her out of the water, and then yeah, I figured you'd like that military thing, Gordon. And then they put Kojak on, and we moved them to another night. I mean, we were relentless. So, you know, who knew? And of course, the thing got terrible reviews. Just cynical,
Devastating reviews.
Yeah, and everybody thought it was gonna be a big flop, except Aaron Spelling and Gavin MacLeod. Those two guys
And
believed
Gavin MacLeod.
from the get-go, and then of course everybody believed.
Well, if I can jump in, just so we can give this this is going to be a lot of fun, and there's going to be a lot of banter because these two guys, oh my, yeah, it's like old homeschool week. But if we could start with Ted, you started out in Oakland, California, and The Love Boat wasn't your first success. That's what made you a household name. But before The Love Boat, take us on your path to toward being a bartender on a cruise ship.
Well, I did a lot of theater in New York and in Los Angeles, and I was hustling, so I went.
Yeah,
to
make sure you
the
don't leave out the
American-
arrest record.
I was accepted at the American Film Institute, and I was up for a part on a series called That's My Mama. And every other week they were canceling whether they should put in my character. And when I won the main prize at the James Cagney Fellowship Awards show, they decided to take a chance on my character. And I got on television on That's My Mama, playing a character named Junior, who incidentally is one of Viola Davis. Now, Viola Davis won an Academy Award and won Tonys. When she was coming up as a kid, she loved my character on TV, and she's just written an autobiography, and I'm in the book. I can't believe it. I'm in the book, and I had met her on occasion. She was very nice.
Yeah, the chapter is called "Whatever Happened to Ted Lange."
Yeah, right, exactly. And then I got on. I did another series called Mr. T and Tina. And then I went on the ABC, both shows were on ABC. ABC just picked me up and put me on Love Boat without a screen test, audition, or nothing. But they knew what I could do because I had done 2 previous series before them. And I remember sitting with Bernie and Fred, and Bernie said, "Hey, man, I didn't see you at the audition." And I said, "Bernie, the really good actors didn't have to."
Okay, now I got to interrupt here because this is something of a sore point. We've known each other for 5 decades. And this asshole always brings that up. The fact that he didn't have to audition for Love Boat, and I had to provide a urine test and a proof of citizenship to get on the damn show. I mean, I had more auditions than Donald Trump is having accusations right now. Okay, I mean, and it never ever stops. I mean,
no, and I did that to Bernie for 10 years. Every time Bernie would fuck up, I would say, "That's why you had to audition," you know.
Yeah, I did not have the luster when I came in to audition.
Yes, you did. You had the Saturday morning monster luster.
Yeah, I was okay. This guy's on
ABC. Tell him.
This guy is on ABC primetime, right?
Yes.
2 shows, not 1, 2 shows. And I'm on a Saturday morning live kids show called Monster Squad, where I am essentially playing a young Pat Boone, all right, with white bucks and a cardigan sweater. And it's me, a guy who was playing Dracula, a guy who was playing Frankenstein, and a guy who was playing the Wolfman named Bucky Cartelian, whose previous biggest role had been in Planet of the Apes. He'd been in the movies for 10 years. Nobody knew what he looked like. Okay. That was my resume. I mean, I'm surprised they didn't make me solve quantum mechanics to get on the show. It was so good.
Yeah.
However, I quickly established myself.
Well, Ted, you were on Broadway in Hair.
That's right. And I did the nude scene. Back then, I was proud to do the nude scene. I don't think I want to do the nude scene today.
Now they tell him to turn around.
Yeah. But, I was there with the guys, Ben Vereen, Andre DeShields now, who just won a Tony a couple of years ago. So that was my initiation into New York theater. And also I did it with a gentleman, I did Ain't Supposed to Die a Natural Death with Melvin Van Peebles, who was a big hero in the Black community when I was growing up. So because he did Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. And he's one of my writing influences was Melvin Van Peebles. So yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful journey and experience. And Fred is a writer too. Fred used to write the episodes on Love Boat. As a matter of fact, when the writers wouldn't write for me, Fred wrote for me.
Oh, wow. That's
I couldn't get the writers to write for me, so Fred wrote for me.
When we first came on the show, we were essentially bellboys. I mean, we would say hello and goodbye to the guests, and then there might be one scene on the Lido deck. We were kind of ogling girls and chatting with one another. But beyond that, it was a pretty light lift. And then they started to write for the regular members of the cast. They'd write for Gavin, of course, and they'd write for Lauren, who played Julie, and Bernie and myself. They didn't write anything for Ted. And after a while, it got to be kind of embarrassing. So Bernie and I started talking about this, and we said, we got to create some kind of a show for Ted, because this is just not right. And so we sat down, we wrote this thing, and it was kind of based on, you guys know who Satchel Paige is, right? The famous pitcher of the Negro League. Well, we kind of wrote a show based on a guy like that. And Scatman Crothers played the guy.
Okay.
And it was a pretty damn good show, right, Teddy?
It was an excellent.
I like
show.
it.
It was a good show. And so that kind of got him on the map. And then we wrote a few more. And then, by that time, he'd kind of established himself as a full member of the company. And then he went on to, direct episodes and write his own episodes. And so, yeah, but that was the kind of thing that we just did because there was kind of a survival element for the regular members of the company. We had all of these guest stars every week, and that was exciting. But underneath that was the realization that if we were going to get anywhere as actors on the program ourselves, we were going to have to establish our own turf. Gavin, not so much, because Gavin was first among equals, and that was fine. And Lauren, whom they had discovered in a restaurant on Sunset Boulevard, was one of Aaron Spelling's latest finds, and she had a certain cachet at the beginning. But the rest of us were like a three-headed beast, and consigned to the backgrounds. And so we kind of had to figure out how to insert ourselves into the show, and writing was one way we did it. And then I think the other way was just to kind of constantly make nuisances of ourselves and punch up scenes when they weren't working. You'd agree with that, wouldn't you, my bad?
Well, and the other thing is we looked out for each other, which is evidenced by the show that they wrote for me. But when we would go and sit in one guy's trailer or not and work out the comedy bits.
Yeah.
That was the other thing. Sometimes the comedy wasn't strong enough, and we would sit in the room and figure out the scene, figure out the comedy. Then we would present it to the producers, which was that's us doing our homework and being, diligent about being actors.
We were like, Bernie and Ted and I, we were like a bullpen. There was a starting rotation, Gavin and Lauren and the guest stars. And we would come in to kind of finish scenes or put little buttons on them. And that led to writing full scripts and eventually writing larger roles for ourselves. But what's interesting about this is this is the exception that proves the rule, because television, of course, really, I think much more so than the theater and film, is very cutthroat. Networks need hits, and it's very competitive, and they need stars. And Love Boat was the exception that proves the rule, because if you go back and look at many of these other shows that were contemporary with us or even before or after, most of the stories you hear are how the cast hated one another, and all of these rivalries and infighting and people trying to screw one another out of various roles. Never happened on our show. We were essentially committed to each other's survival. And that's, I think,
we were a family.
We were, and we looked out for one another, and we still do.
Well, the obvious question I want to ask, and you've probably been asked it 100 times before, but I'm going to ask it anyway. For each of you, that show had 32 people who had either won an Oscar already or who later in their careers went on to win an Oscar. Who were you most in awe of when, was it Scatman Crothers? Was it, Ernest Borgnine? Was it, what, for each of you, which star came on the show and you went, oh my God, I can't believe I'm sharing a set with this guy or this woman? Go ahead, Ted, you go first.
Listen, we had Gene Kelly on the show. And Gene Kelly was a grumpy guy. He didn't like nothing. And they told us, stay away from Gene Kelly. Don't talk to Gene Kelly. And I found we were in Hong Kong. Fred and I were in Hong Kong, and we had written the script that Gene Kelly was appearing in. Fred and I had written that, or rewritten it really. And I'm sitting in a van with Gene Kelly. He's got on glasses. He's kind of grouchy, and he's reading a newspaper. And I go and I sit down in front of him like this. And he
that
looks
can-
up from it.
That can be scary, guys. If that's
Yeah,
what happened, I mean, that can scare you.
He looks up from his newspaper like this. And I'm like this, Mr. Kelly, can I ask you a question? And he's kind of gone, no. What is it? And I said, what was it like dancing with the Nicholas brothers? Now, if you know anything about the movies and the Nicholas Brothers was a pair of Black tap dancers.
Yeah.
And I realized after I said it that all of his questions were about singing in the rain. You know, whenever somebody got him, they wanted to know about singing in the rain. I'm the first guy that said, hey, what was it like dancing with Black dancers? So he kind of looked at me and he thought about it. And he says, you want a story about the Nicholas brothers? And I went, and he goes, I'll tell you a story about the Nicholas brothers. We hit it off. And at the end of the day, he says to me, hey, you want to have a drink back at the hotel? And I go, yeah. So we go back to the hotel, we clean up, we meet in the bar, and I spend the next hour and a half, 2 hours chatting with Gene Kelly. That, my friend, was fantastic. How about
That's amazing.
who's yours?
Yeah, Fred, your turn.
Well, the first person who comes to mind always is Ethel Merman, who played my mother. And Ethel was very down to earth. I mean, she was larger than life. And, you know, she had a voice like an air warden system. And no, I mean, really. But Ethel started doing our show in the twilight of her career.
Yes.
And there was no height that she had not ascended to. But by the time she did our show, she was an elderly woman and just looking to work and looking to be remembered. And we treated her that way. You know, she was obviously a cathedral unto herself when it came to her vocal talent. But she quickly became one of the family. And the story I like to tell was, at the time she did the show, my youngest daughter, my only daughter at the time, Mariah, who's now a singer and an actress herself, was 9 years old, and she was a huge Ethel Merman fan. I mean, everything Ethel Merman. I mean, she worshiped at the altar of Ethel Merman. So imagine how important I was the night I came home and told her Ethel Merman was in the show. So I woke her up one morning early and I said, hey, you're not going to school today. We're going to the set to meet Ethel Merman. All right, okay. So she's trembling all the way. So we get to the set at about 6:30 in the morning when women are in makeup. Now, if you've ever been in a makeup room at 6:30 in the morning and you've seen women getting makeup on, it's kind of like a horror movie, okay? It's a little scary. And the older they are, the scarier it gets. And Ethel was about 70 and she had, you know, this big skull cap on because they're going to put a big wig on, and she's sitting back in the makeup chair. And we walk in and it's quiet and reverent because, you know, it's early and she's Ethel Merman and they're applying makeup. And we're standing behind her in the makeup room. And I go, Ethel, my daughter, Mariah, is a huge fan of yours, and she just had to come and meet you. So I hope that's okay. And Ethel swung around in her chair and looked at my daughter and said, call me Grandma.
I was waiting to hear.
And
I was waiting to hear if she broke into the air. It's no business like show.
Well, I mean, that would have been next, but I mean, and I think this is why my daughter went into the business, because that was just, it was just breathtaking for her. And she tells that story all the time too. So that's kind of my famous. Now, of course, Ethel, I don't know, she must have had 10 Tonys. I don't think she ever won an Academy Award, but she was the kind of icon that we had all the time. And here's another thing about this show that I think is important is we understood our role, Ted and Bernie and the rest of us, that we were obviously co-stars of the show, but we were also hosts. And when these people came on the show, it was our business, or we felt it was our business, to make them welcome, to make them feel like they were comfortable and that this was going to be a fun experience and they were going to be well treated, particularly people like Ethel Merman, who had kind of been out of the sketch for a long time. And when Gene Kelly did our show, Gene Kelly was not getting movie offers, okay? So this was about the best thing he was going to get for a while. Well, we always made them feel like they were now enjoying a kind of busman's holiday for a great career. So we would take guys like Ray Bolger and Jack Gilford and others to lunch, Teddy and I, and we'd just ask them to tell us stories. And that's
we had a thing called we called it the Goldwyn Club.
Yeah, that's right.
And we would seek out the older entertainers because they know stuff that it's not in the books. It's not in the Hollywood books. Dana Andrews told us how Otto Preminger screwed the director out of Laura, directing Laura. Stuff like that, stuff you just can't find.
Vincent Price came on the show, and he was lovely to everybody, but he was a wonderful raconteur. And so we immediately started teasing one another because I went to Harvard and he went to Yale, and we were kind of back and forth. And it came out during one of our discussions that I'm from Iowa, and he said, "Oh, Iowa, yes. I actually was in Des Moines in 1943 doing a production of Don Juan in Hell with Charles Boyer, Sir Cedric Hardwicke, Edward Moorhead, and myself. And after one of our performances, we go out to dinner, and Hardwicke orders fish in Des Moines in 1943. And the fish comes, and Hardwicke takes a bite. Goes, long time no see.
I had dinner.
You didn't have to coach that out of him. He just told those stories.
I had dinner with Vincent Price, and I picked up a lovely habit that I saw him do, because we were in this place. It was a social event, and celebrities and fans would come up to Vincent Price, and he had newly married Coral Brown, who was an English actress. And as people come in, they would totally, you know how sometimes people they turn their back to the wife, or they, and they try to get in and shake your hand. And Vincent Price always says, "Have you met my lovely wife, Coral Brown?" And they would turn and acknowledge Coral. And people, no matter what, he says, and he always deferred to her, the first sentence, "Have you met my lovely wife, Coral Brown?" And so I picked up that habit from just watching Vincent. When I'm out someplace and I'm with my wife and people come up, I say, "Have you met my lovely wife, Mary?" Which is really great when you get home late at night. Yeah. But but that was, you know what? The thing is, the old timers had a way about them of being on time, knowing their lines. I remember Greer Garson came on. She had everybody's name on the crew.
Yeah.
Greer Garson, I mean, they had the habits that you want to acquire that the younger people didn't have.
I got to ask both of you now. It's interesting. We're banding about these names: Ethel Merman, Greer Garson, Gene Kelly, the stars of the silver screen. From back in the late 70s, early 80s, that was a bygone era.
Yeah.
Now here are the two of you, and you're from a bygone era.
Careful.
Of television.
All right.
In fashion. And the baton gets passed. when did you realize on the show, when did you first start to get recognized on the street, going out, walking around? Oh, it's Isaac, there's Gopher. When did that first start to happen to you? When did it hit you that, oh my, I'm a star. I'm a name.
Well,
Well,
it's
go
not so
ahead.
much that you're that as much as the fact that our show was in the top 5. If it wasn't number 1, it was number 2, you know? So it was automatic. It was almost, recognition was automatic because the show was so popular. And back then it was only 3 stations.
Yeah, but
You
it's
know, it was
one of the things that,
NBC.
I mean, that's all true. And in that regard, it would be like Dallas or Cheers or one of our domestic
Yeah.
shows. But Love Boat quickly became an international hit. So it was running in foreign markets while we were still shooting. And that was a phenomenon that none of us really predicted or were really ready for. I mean, and this is another story. We were on location in the Mediterranean, okay? And we were in a little town on the Adriatic coast in Turkey called Kuşadası. Now, Love Boat was a huge, huge hit in Turkey. And we were shooting at these old Roman ruins, Ephesus. And we were on a break, and I was in this little leather shop. And this town couldn't have been any more than 400 or 500 people, just a little village. And so I walk into this leather shop, and I'm looking around. I've got my uniform on because it's between takes. I don't have time to change. And the guy who's the proprietor of the show sees me and does this. And he runs out into the street and he says, "Mr. Gopher is here." And the next thing I know, there were 1,000 faces pressed against the window. I felt I was going to suffocate. And this is Turkey, right? I mean, who knew? And that was not uncommon just about everywhere we went. I mean, there were people. The nice thing about Love Boat, this sounds like a criticism, but it's really not, is you really didn't have to speak English to understand the show. Okay. I mean, it was dubbed in all sorts of languages. In Greece, it was called Topliotis Agapes. In French, Les Croisières Samuz, Barca d'Amour, had all of these names. But whether it was you had subtitles or not, you knew what was going on. Okay. It was not that tough to figure out. And so it became this kind of huge international phenomenon. And to some degree.
Yeah, I have a story. I have a story about international. We were in Hong Kong. And one of the things they told us, if you take a suit to Hong Kong, pick out some material, give it to the tailors there, they will make you an exact duplicate of your favorite suit, and it wouldn't cost you, it would cost you a quarter as much, not as much. So I'm in this place with an East Indian guy. And I said, "Oh, listen, I'm so happy to see you. I'm looking for an Indian restaurant. Do you know of an Indian restaurant where I can go and get some good Indian food?" And he says, "You want to get Indian food?" I go, "Yes, yes, yes." He says, he writes down an address. He says, "Go to this address." Gives me the address. If you go there at 7 o'clock, I guarantee you an excellent meal. So I take the address, go back to my hotel. Later that evening, I get a cab. I go to the address. It's an apartment building. And I go and I look and I ring the name on the thing. It's his apartment. He had his wife cook dinner for me. And then he had the whole family in the living room watching me eat. I mean, how can it was fun. Fred and I, we just had a ball.
And it survived us after we left the show, because I remember I was in Congress and I was on a delegation to Israel, and at that point we were selling a certain brand of missile to the Israelis. And so I had a meeting with the Israeli defense minister, part of the delegation. And the guy comes out and he greets me, says, "Oh, Congressman, it's nice to meet you, please." And so I go into his office and he closes the door and he says, "You're my first celebrity since Goldie Hawn." Oh. I said, "How about the missile deal?" He says, "Oh, no, no problem. We'll do it. But will you sign this? Will you do this?" I mean, this guy is the Israeli defense minister, all right? And I'm Gopher from the Love Boat, and Congressman Gopher to you. And so, tell me that isn't, an international third world power. That's what we were. That's what we were.
Yeah.
That was a question I was going to springboard into because I find it ironic. The Love Boat as a TV show served as a vehicle to allow actors, not just silver screen legends like the Greer Garsons and Gene Kelly's, Ethel Mermans, who weren't necessarily in high demand, to give them a vehicle, but it also served as a chance for actors to kind of break out of typecasting. Like everyone saw Florence Henderson would go, "Well, there's Carol Brady." Well, here's a chance for Carol Brady to show, or Florence Henderson to show that she's more than just the mother of 6 kids. And
also, it introduced Tom Hanks, Martin Short, Billy Crystal. All those guys were up and coming.
I wrote the show for Billy Crystal.
We could see their talent. I remember that very specifically, sitting down talking to Martin Short saying, "Man, you are good." He had just done a series called The Associates, and he was guest starring on our show, and his talent was obvious. Billy Crystal, the talent was obvious, So that was the fun thing about our show too, is we caught the guys going up and we got the guys coming down. Yeah, man. Yeah. Howard Keel did our show. Howard Keel did Kismet. He did our show. And I remember the director saying, "Cut, print, moving on." And Howard Keel would go. So I went over and I said, "Hey, what's the matter? You all right?" He says, "That wasn't it." I said, "Well, you want to do another take? Let's tell him we do another take." He goes, No. Don't do another take. But I know that wasn't it. Mm-hmm. And then he kept working the scenes. About the middle of the day, the next day, he said, "Cut, print," and Howard Keel went, "Yes." I said, "You're all right?" He says, "I got it back." Because he was rusty. He was rusty and he got it back. So that was part of the beauty of our show.
The question I had, though, is the two of you, after Love Boat ends, ironically, I would imagine, and this is a question I wanted to ask you, I would imagine you were somewhat typecast. Ted Lange, no one's going to buy him as a police officer, as a this, as a that. He's Isaac the bartender. Fred Grandy. Now, you decided to pursue a political career and served 4 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives as a congressman.
That's right.
But why did you pursue the political end? That's a story in of itself. Why did you get into politics? Sonny Bono, Al Franken, there's a lot of U.S.
Yeah, all those guys came after me. I was the apostolic father for all those guys. Why did I get into politics?
Yeah.
Well, I had, as a young man, been a congressional aide for a guy who represented my part of Iowa. And so I'd had a taste of it. And I actually bailed from my job as a congressional staffer, partly because I was so appalled at how terrible the acting was in Congress. Just unbelievable. And
some things don't change.
Yeah, and I didn't really think about it until after Love Boat became a huge success. And I guess I got to a point where I had pretty much accomplished what I had set out to do in show business. At the time, And this would have been the early 80s, mid 80s. Unlike a lot of my fellow actors, I really, it's because it sounds strange, but I've been on a hit show for 8 years, but I really wasn't into acting. I was into being a celebrity, and that had happened. But one of the things that you find when you take that route and you're doing the game shows and you're making the appearances on the Tonight Show and you're there, here and there, and people recognize you and you get good tables in restaurants and things like that, is after a while you say to yourself, kind of like Peggy Lee did, is that all there is? And part of me started thinking about, geez, I'd like to serve something a little larger than myself. And as it turned out, my part of the country, Western Iowa, Northwestern Iowa, in the early 80s, was in a terrible agricultural depression, a downturn. And I, celebrity that I was, thought, oh, well, what they need is a good communicator. So that's clearly me, right? So I jumped into politics knowing absolutely nothing about it. I mean, I went back to represent one of the largest agricultural districts in the United States, and I didn't know the difference between a soybean and a jelly bean. I mean, literally, okay? But
You knew the difference between a soybean and a jelly bean.
okay, you found me out. Okay, nice work.
Whoa.
That's high marks for you. Good work. Good work. Anyway, so I go back there and I have to learn it all on the fly. And I do, and I get elected in a very close race, and I found myself actually enjoying representing these people in Washington. And it never, ever would have happened had I not been on the show. I mean, easily, my reputation from Love Boat was worth, and this would have been the early 80s, probably worth $100,000 worth of campaign investment. Okay.
More than that.
You're probably right. And of course, my opponents all thought, oh, this guy's a Hollywood actor. We're gonna laugh him out of town. And what I learned was the affection that so many people had for this show and the interest was enough to get them into the tent to see me. And once they were in the tent, I had to figure out how to say, yeah, okay, now I need you to vote for me. And they did. And so that's really what happened. And I think, quite honestly, had I known how difficult and how complicated and how expensive and how treacherous politics is, from the get-go, I never would have done it. But fortunately, I was just as naive going into politics as I was starting in show business.
But well, before you go on, now, you were one of the first, but well, I want you to know there, Fred, that you weren't the first actor to go into politics. There was a certain guy in the state of California who later, he went on to win the presidency.
Well, all right,
so
Gordon, you want to throw down? Go ahead, throw down. I'll tell you. All right, wise guy. Here's a story. I'm a freshman Republican in the House of Representatives, okay? I'm a pretty low piece of the totem pole.
Yep.
So I'm in office for about 2 or 3 months, and I get an invitation to come down to the White House for a dinner, okay? Now, the last thing I wanted to do was call attention to myself as a celebrity, because I'm there to work, I'm here to represent my people. So I say, I'm sorry, I can't go. I'm much too busy. So about a half an hour later, I get a call from the White House press secretary, and she said, Congressman, could you reconsider the dinner tonight? And I said, well, why? And she said, well, we have you seated next to the First Lady. She's a huge fan of the show. Do you think you could change your mind? I said, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Okay. All right. So, yeah, do all the Reagan impressions you want, partner. But, I know what the real thing sounds like.
Wait a minute. You're the greatest celebrity who ever became president. Okay. Absolutely. Bar none. Okay. Fred Grandy. Okay. He's second rate. He's nothing. Okay. Very overrated. Okay. Very overrated. Nobody has been better than me. you're fired. Okay, that's it.
I used to have
Very
him on my
good.
radio show.
Very good.
Not bad for.
I recognize Nixon everywhere, anywhere
Yeah.
with you.
Right. Do James Buchanan for us.
Oh.
Anyway, I'm
do.
Right. I mean,
I'm-
again, talking about the impact of the show,
Yes.
it stretched all the way to the White House. And you know, Reagan and I had kind of a bond because we both came out of the same business and went forward to go into politics.
Oh, now that's your straight, Ted. After the show ended, how easy, how hard, how difficult, what were your challenges after the show? I'm sure it opened some doors. I'm sure it made life was difficult with the baggage of, well, that's Isaac the bartender. So
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The thing is, my secret is that I had a passion for theater. So I
Yes.
ended up doing theater all over the country. I was in the first national tour of Driving Miss Daisy. I started writing plays. Up to this time, I've written 26 plays, and I'm doing a play reading at the North Carolina Black Theater Festival in August, the first week in August. I'm doing one of my plays there at North Carolina, but I started expanding other areas. So I started directing television. I started directing low budget features. I appeared in, the thing was, I wasn't getting calls from the studio, but if you had a budget of $300, I was in your movie. So I didn't stop working.
You were
as
in
an
Terminal
actor,
Exposure and
but
Glitch. Those movies
studio
after Love Boat.
movies. Yeah, after Love Boat. you
Yeah,
know.
Terminal
So-
Exposure and Glitch. Those were different roles.
Yeah,
than
they-
Isaac.
God, you're on all my movies.
Oh yeah,
Terminal
I've seen them.
Exposure and Glitch. Yeah. So I did some acting, but it was usually, Steven Spielberg wasn't calling me, although he had my number, he just didn't call. What I did was I expanded my talent because Love Boat nurtured my directing side, and Fred and Bernie and Gavin, they were very helpful in me getting more gigs with Aaron Spelling and Doug Kramer as a director, because they backed me up, because they would say, hey, we got a really good director here. Why are you going somewhere else? So, and then I took that in. When I was in Hong Kong, I hung out with Lee Majors. And Lee Majors wanted me to direct him on his show, Fall Guy.
Yep.
And that happened because he was on the show. So that opened the doors to me doing a lot more television directing. And I've been doing that. When I'm not acting, I'm directing. When I'm not directing, I'm writing plays. So I feel really fortunate in that I expanded on the talents of my artistry, but that is primarily because of Love. But I learned how to write because of Love. But I remember the writers came and said, Fred and Ted, we kind of came up short for you on the Hong Kong episode, and we said, well, let us read it, and then if we come up with something, let us pitch it to you. And we did. We came up with a thing between Gopher and Isaac and Gene Kelly and Yvette Mimieux, so
Of course,
and Fred got a deal when he was there. He got a deal. How many episodes did you get a deal to write? Didn't you get a deal to write?
9 or 10,
lot of
something like that.
episodes.
Yeah. But the important thing to remember is this extends to the present day. I mean, we are currently working together. Ted and I and a bunch of other people formed a production company in the last year to do this, Give 'Em Hell Harry, which is a one-man show about Harry Truman that I'm touring the company with. Ted's going to be directing that episode at a theater in Indiana in September, and it's the 5th city we've played. And he and I have appeared in a production of I'm Not Rappaport together. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we still do and work together. There's a theater in Syracuse where we both work. He as a director, me as an actor. So there is a consistency, and it's almost as if we're a repertory company.
I might get a chance to see you if it's Syracuse, because that's right across Lake Ontario from where I live. You can almost go straight south.
Oh, I've done 5 shows there, Gordon. I just did Dirty Rotten Scoundrels there this
Oh,
summer,
nice.
and Ted and I did.
Yeah, you gotta.
I'm
You
not
have to
Rappaport.
check it out. You have to check it out. He's very good. Wonderful work.
And so you know,
Love
I
the
mean,
direction this guy.
yeah, and so you know, we still kind of back one another up the way we did when we were on the show.
Well, unlike, the thing that is occurring to me, the more we talk to more and more actors who have been on shows like, the Derek McGraths, the Gordon Claps, et cetera, is you find out how incestuous the Hollywood industry is. But then you take a show like The Love Boat, which is such a vehicle for such a conglomeration of stage, film, television series, it's like the Hollywood industry on steroids. Did you ever, we've got to bring up the comparison between, because the two shows had a similar makeup, different but the same in the sense that they were both vehicles for actors, well-established actors, to get back on network primetime TV. Fantasy Island. Did you get a lot of comparisons between The Love Boat and Fantasy Island?
Well, let me just disabuse you of that notion immediately.
Okay.
There would have been no Fantasy Island had there not been a Love Boat, right, Ted? Am I
Yeah,
over the top on this? Love Boat was a huge hit from Jump Street. This may be an apocryphal story, but I'll tell it anyway. Aaron, of course, at the height of his career, had I don't know how many shows on ABC, and ABC was internally known as Aaron's broadcasting company.
Okay.
And so when Aaron brought a show to New York, they bought it. Well, apparently, the story goes that Aaron did go to New York to sell a show. And at this point, he had, I don't know, 4 or 5 shows on the network. And he was pitching some show, and apparently the studio, the network executives pushed back. And I guess they figured, well, we've had Aaron in our crosshairs for a long time. Maybe we'll just assert ourselves and say, Aaron, I don't think that one's going to work. So supposedly Aaron got all upset and said, you know what the problem with you guys are? You guys have no imagination. I mean, what do I have to do? Come up with some story about some kind of magical guy that lives on a desert island and grants people's wishes? And the network guy said, sold. Fantasy Island. Okay. By the way, you know who the first Rourke was supposed to be? Mr. Rourke? Orson Welles.
Who?
Orson Welles was originally, they wanted Orson Welles to be Mr. Rourke. I don't think he wanted to be Mr. Rourke, but I think that's who they originally had in mind. But anyway, so the point.
Aaron tried to get him on Love Boat. You know that story, Fred?
Well, sure. I mean, he that's on his tombstone. He says I never did Love Boat.
Yeah.
But no, supposedly this was a guy who had such integrity. He did Paul Masson ads, but he couldn't do Love Boat. Okay. Anyway. But quite honestly, Fantasy Island was a derivative of Love Boat, and then there were other.
So was Hotel.
Hotel.
Hotel?
Same Hotel was the same
is
thing.
Love Boat.
Yeah, and then there were
Landlocked Love Boat.
and then there were other derivatives. There was a thing called Super Train, which was a complete disaster. Aaron didn't do that.
Oh my God.
But it was.
There was
it
one with an airplane. What was the one with an airplane? Do you
Flying
remember that?
High. It's called
Flying High. Pat Klaus.
Pat Klaus was on that show, but that was actually before Love Boat. That was before Love Boat.
That was before us?
Yeah, but it was a dog, and it crashed and burned.
Oh, it was terrible.
Anyway, Love Boat really created that genre of rotating guest stars and pardon me, 2 or 3 stories, an A story, a B story, a C story. And, once they had the model, they said, all we have to do is now build the genre around it. And so Fantasy Island quickly became essentially our partner in crime, because, we were at 9 o'clock on Saturday, they were at 10 o'clock on Saturday, and they ran away with the ratings.
Oh, it was a fantastic show. The one episode that sticks out in my mind, and I can't remember the gentleman who played the character of the chef, but there was a new chef assigned to the princess, to the boat. And
I think it was Al Molinaro.
It was Al Molinaro.
Oh,
Al
that would
Molinaro
make
from
sense.
Happy Days.
Yeah.
From Happy Days, yeah.
McLeod kept asking for a bottle of ketchup.
Yeah, no, I remember that scene.
Yeah,
I remember we were all in that scene.
Yeah.
That was our choral dining room day.
Yeah. Al Molinaro, great guy, by the way.
Yeah.
Great guy.
What about the one with Shirley from What's Happening?
Oh, Shirley
Where
Hemphill.
she was,
Shirley
she was
Hemphill.
coming after you.
Yeah, I used to go down to the Comedy Store all the time and watch the stand-ups. And one time I was seated at the bar, and this girl in coveralls comes over and sits next to me and says, and at that time I was on That's My Mama. So she says, "Hey, you're the guy that comes in the doorway." I go, yeah. Well, she starts talking to me, and I'm laughing my ass off, and I'm saying, who is this girl? Next thing I know, towards the end of the evening, ladies and gentlemen, Shirley Hemphill. And the girl I had the conversation with said everything she told me while I was sitting at the bar. She had been doing her routine on me.
Oh,
So yeah, I knew Shirley before, and poor Shirley. Shirley signed on to do the Love Boat. We did this thing. She was chasing me, and then she pulled me aside. She said, "Ted, when are we going to Mexico?" I said, "Shirley, you're on an episode that doesn't leave port. Everything is done here in 20th Century Fox,
Yeah,
She
they
said,
were.
"Damn, I wanted to go to Mexico. I thought I had a free trip." So not today.
I think
baby.
Juliette Mills did 11 shows before she got a cruise, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how many shows she did. I mean, she and Charo probably hold the record, but she did at least 10 or 11 shows before they put her on a boat.
What was
Yeah.
Charo like? Because I knew her sister Carmen when I worked in Beverly Hills. I used to always chat with her sister
Oh,
Carmen,
did
the
you?
nicest person.
Well,
could ever meet.
Carmen did all of Charo's clothes.
Oh wow, I didn't
Carmen
know.
essentially designed
Yeah. She
and
showed them all.
clothed Charo. So she was they were like white on rice. I mean, they were always together. And Charo was and is a delight, absolutely ageless.
I did a thing with the Broadway actress Jen Cody, and she was a big Charo fan. And I said, "You want to talk to Charo?" She says, "What? Can you?" I said, I can call her up. Yeah. And I called up Charo, told her I had this big fan from Broadway, Jennifer Cody, and they bonded just like that, man. I mean,
Jen named her dog after Charo, so there was already a
Yeah.
bond. That's their
Yeah.
dog's name.
oh, that's
Yeah,
me.
so that was fun.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So the big thing you guys are working on right now is this Give 'Em Hell, Harry,
Yes.
which is, tell us a bit about that. It's a tribute to Harry Truman.
Well, it's actually not a new show. I mean, it was James
Okay.
Whitmore did it almost 50 years ago. And we, and I say we, I mean Ted and Hunter Foster, our director, and a couple of other people who are in this little LLC that we formed, all found ourselves out of work and wondering what we were going to do during the pandemic. So we started saying, all right, how can we kind of help regional theaters and help ourselves get through this period? And I mentioned this show. I said, well, here's kind of a relic, but I reread it and I said, my gosh, this is more relevant now than it was 75 years ago when James Whitmore did it. So we started working on it. Hunter Foster, our director, and I did it. We rehearsed on Cape Cod for a week, and then we first did it at the Aspen Theater Company. And then we've been moving it around the country, and Hunter's the original director, but Ted has staged it a couple of times now and made some changes. So, but I guess the thing I want to say that is so important is that Harry Truman is a play, Give 'Em Hell Harry is a play about a politician you could actually trust. What a concept, right? I mean, and the more I read this play, the more I do this play, the more relevant it becomes. I mean, it's on the second page of the play, he's turning to a guy and said, "This damn inflation business has got to stop." What? 50 years ago? Writing, essentially he's talking about 1946. So it's a delightful show. It's a funny show, right, Teddy?
Yeah. Well, Fred does a wonderful job of capturing Truman. And I have to say that he's really a strong actor because he's playing a Democrat. Fred's playing a Democrat.
Ted's
And believe
favorite
me,
line.
he's really good. I believe him as a Democrat. So, it's really wonderful work.
Ted has his favorite line in the show comes very late in the play when Truman hated Richard Nixon. Okay. I knew Richard Nixon. David Eisenhower was my roommate in college. I was the best man at David and Julie's wedding. So I knew the family. But Teddy, there is a line that Truman says in the play. He's talking to the press and he says, "Let me say one thing more. Richard Nixon is a no good lying bastard." And Ted cracks up whenever he hears that. I mean, he doesn't even have to be in the room. He can be in the men's room and I can hear him laugh. Okay. So I think that's why he does this.
We have fun.
He just likes to hear, looks like hear me tear into Nixon.
Younger viewers of this podcast may not be aware of the fact that it is Harry S. Truman. Correct me if I'm wrong, Fred, but he's the president who came out with the line, "The buck stops here."
Yeah, well, he had a plaque on his desk. We have it in the show. That was on the presidential desk. The buck stops here.
And now we're in an era where it doesn't matter Democratic or Republican. It's not my fault.
Well, but that's exactly the point. I mean, we've got to remember, and it's probably as true in Canada as it is in the United States, when politicians no longer feel as though character matters, the nation suffers. And Truman was a guy who said what he meant and meant what he said. And I mean, this is a guy who decided to integrate entirely the United States military in 1948 in an election year.
Yes.
Nobody did that back in the 40s, when racism was still so prominent, and 5 southern states broke away, formed a third party and ran against him. But that's the way he was. He just said, if it's right, we're going to do it. And to me, that's as important a lesson as you can say right now.
Now, this has been probably, we've never done a podcast with two, iconic stars from one of the biggest shows on television.
That's not our fault.
We have two individuals here. Ted from Oakland, California. We got Fred from Iowa, who went on to study at Harvard. Your backgrounds seem as divergently different. Ted's white, Ted's black, Fred's white.
Well, see, now you're doing it. You might as well call me Fred, like everybody else. Well, but here's the deal.
I'm the guy that got you invited to the Image Awards, bud. I mean, let's not forget.
You cannot buck chemistry.
Yes.
It was instantaneous. Our chemistry, you couldn't dispute it. The minute that he and I appeared on the screen together, it was gold.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter. My background didn't matter. His background.
And it still doesn't. I mean,
liked each other. We both thought each other was funny, and we both would crack each other up.
And then we went away for 35 years and came back to do I'm Not Rappaport, and it was as if we'd never left, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so, I mean, that doesn't always happen. As a matter of fact, that rarely happens. But when you got it, use it because it's gold. It really is gold. And you know, the diversity thing, you just, it transcends ethnicity and culture and background and neighborhoods. And as Ted says, if you have a mutual respect for the other person's talent and their person, it'll take you a long way. It really will.
Yeah, it's gold. It's gold.
It is gold.
So come out and see Fred Grandy and Give 'em Hell Harry wherever you are.
Yeah, at
Well,
the Wagon
in
Wheel
Indiana,
Theater
that's
in
where we
Warsaw,
were.
Indiana, in, well, let's see,
Yeah.
September 23rd, 24th, and 25th. Directed by Ted Lange.
Well, wait, now, if you, someone may not remember, so is there a website you can go to that'll give you the production dates and where it's being put on?
Well, I would suggest you go to the Wagon Wheel Performing Arts Center and dial that up, and that is in Indiana, and that will tell you everything that you need to know. We have a colleague named Lakeisha Green, who's the executive director there, who knows us from Syracuse, and she'll give you chapter and verse on this thing. So we'll be there in September, and then who knows where we'll be. We're, you know, we're constantly looking to move this thing, but yeah, I mean, we're still having fun. I mean,
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
both 70 plus and we're still having fun at this. What's to
I'll tell
complain
you
about?
something, you know, this is over a Zoom video conference, but if we darkened both of your hair, if we got rid of the snow on the roof, I can still totally see Gopher and I can still totally see Isaac. You know,
Oh, thank
Totally.
you. That's very kind.
Yeah, well,
Very
I'd
kind.
like to shout out to my cosmetologist and all the people that did the
And your
facelifts for
hairdresser.
both of them. Yeah, my hairdresser.
Mm.
Yeah.
well, if you enjoyed this episode of Mark 2.0, please subscribe, share, like, follow Fred Grandy, follow Ted Lange, and support their careers. Get out and see Give 'em Hell Harry, a tribute to Harry S. Truman, one of the greatest presidents in the United States.
I think so. Greatest president of the 20th century, if you ask me.
And
Don't tell
Mark-
Nixon.
Uh, Great.